Inception Limbo. Christopher Nolan's film Inception has inspired a notorious theory that the entire story is set in a kind of afterlife limbo, rather than just shared dreams. In the ending, Cobb returns home and spins his totem, the top, which wobbles slightly before the film cuts to black, never revealing whether it falls or keeps spinning. And this ambiguity has driven debate since the film's release. A darker theory proposes that the characters are already dead, and that the dream levels function as metaphorical layers of the afterlife, an idea explored in analysis pieces that read the entire film as a purgatory story. Supporters note that the team members can be read as guilt-ridden people with unfinished business, which fits an allegorical purgatory reading more than a straightforward corporate espionage story. The concept of limbo is depicted as an endless and decaying dream space where time stretches dramatically, and where Cobb and Mal spent decades building and then destroying an entire city. Nolan has repeatedly avoided giving a simple yes or no answer about whether Cobb is awake, and in interviews he emphasizes that the ending is about Cobb choosing to accept his reality and focus on his children instead of obsessing over the totem. This deliberate ambiguity is key to why the afterlife reading remains possible, because the film never explicitly confirms or denies that the dream levels might be read as post-mortem states. Rekall dream. Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall has long fueled the theory that nearly everything after Douglas Quaid sits down in the recall chair is a lethal dream implant rather than reality. In the 1990 film, Quaid purchases a memory package from Rekall that offers him a fantasy of being a secret agent on Mars, a setup that closely resembles what later unfolds in the story. Rekall promises a vivid and cinematic experience in which the client feels as though the events are real and cannot distinguish them from genuine memories. Analyses point out that Rekall's sales pitch lines up with the eventual Blue Sky Mars climax, which makes the ending feel like the promised payoff of Quaid's fantasy package, rather than an objective epilogue. The all-a-dream theory argues that Quaid's apparent heroics are nothing more than the memory sequence, playing out in his mind while his body may be in danger on the operating chair. Debate pieces note that the film shows scenes where Quaid is not present, which opponents of the dream reading argue undercuts a purely subjective experience, while supporters counter that fully constructed cinematic memories could easily include such third-person sequences. Commentary summaries note that Verhoeven has talked about deliberately keeping the story ambiguous, and has even said he personally leans toward the entire adventure being a dream, while still leaving space for other readings. Halo ending. Minority Report closes with an apparently happy resolution, but a widely discussed theory suggests that everything after Anderton is put under the Halo device is only a permanent dream. The warden Gideon explains that prisoners fitted with halos enter a blissful dream state where they imagine everything they ever wanted and no longer desire to wake up, describing what sounds like a permanent, pleasant hallucination. A detailed fan theory argues that once Anderton is haloed for the apparent murder of Leo Crow, all the subsequent scenes, including his rescue, the exposure of Burgess, and the shutdown of pre-crime, occur only in his mind. Supporters note how the tone shifts from a paranoid noir-style thriller to a series of neatly resolved events in which Anderton reconciles with his ex-wife, she is pregnant, and the precogs live peacefully in a remote cottage, all of which resemble wish fulfillment more than the harsh world shown earlier. The theory emphasizes that this ending lineup fits the warden's description of what haloed prisoners experience because it gives Anderton the perfect version of his life that he wanted and wipes away his guilt and trauma. Critics of the theory point out that the film does not explicitly indicate a break in reality, and that the sequence can also be read straightforwardly as a real chain of events where the conspiracy is exposed. Steven Spielberg has not publicly settled the Halo dream theory in a definitive way, which leaves this interpretation alongside others as a valid way some viewers choose to read the ending. Deckard Replicant. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner revolves around a simple but haunting question. Is Rick Deckard himself a replicant, or a human hunting his own kind? In later cuts of the film, Deckard dreams of a unicorn running through a forest, an image that appears to come from deep within his subconscious. At the end of the film, Gaff leaves a small origami unicorn outside Deckard's apartment, implying that he knows the content of Deckard's private dreams, and hinting that those dreams might be artificially implanted. Gaff has left origami figures throughout the story as silent commentary on Deckard's behavior, so this final unicorn is widely seen as a pointed statement about Deckard's true nature. Director Ridley Scott has said in interviews, including a well-known Wired conversation, that he considers Deckard to be a replicant. By contrast, Harrison Ford and co-writer Hampton Fancher have said they view Deckard as human, creating a split between the director's intention and the way the character's performer and writer see him. The 2007 final cut emphasizes the unicorn dream and removes the theatrical voiceover, choices that many critics argue push the film more clearly toward the replicant reading. Second Matrix. A long-standing theory about the Matrix trilogy claims that Zion and the supposed real world are actually just other layers of the Matrix designed to control rebels. Since the early 2000s, fans have proposed that the trilogy depicts multiple layers of simulation, rather than a simple split between the Matrix and the real world. In The Matrix Reloaded, the architect reveals that the One is a built-in control mechanism, and that the destruction and rebuilding of Zion is part of a recurring cycle, which suggests that even the rebel stronghold might be deliberately managed by the machines. Proponents argue that Neo's apparent powers in the supposed real world, such as his ability to sense sentinels and shut them down without being jacked in, make far more sense if that realm is still a simulation. The theory often posits a structure where Zion is a second Matrix designed to contain people who reject the first level, and the Machine City, or the Source, might function as a third layer. The Matrix Resurrections plays with ideas long discussed in fan circles, including layered simulations and shifting versions of reality, which many viewers see as a nod to earlier fan theories. The films never outright state that Zion is another simulation, and the Wachowskis have not publicly presented it that way in widely cited interviews, so the theory remains an interpretive extension of the material rather than a confirmed rule. Thing Survivor. John Carpenter's The Thing ends so ambiguously that one of the most chilling theories claims one of the final two men is secretly the alien imposter. The film's final scene shows MacReady and Childs alone in the ruined Antarctic outpost, sharing a bottle while the camp burns around them, and rescue seems unlikely. The audience never sees a clear test or transformation that settles whether either man is human, and the film cuts to black on this unresolved standoff. One of the most discussed theories suggests that MacReady hands Childs a bottle filled with gasoline from the Molotov cocktails rather than with liquor. According to this reading, when Childs drinks without noticing anything wrong, MacReady laughs not with relief but because only the Thing would be unable to tell gasoline from alcohol. Earlier scenes show the crew preparing Molotov cocktails in similar-looking bottles, which is the visual foundation of this theory. Carpenter has said in interviews that he enjoys hearing different interpretations of the ending, and has never definitively stated which, if either, man is the Thing, preserving the film's mystery. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I create videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really help out. Wonka Snowpiercer. A widely discussed theory claims Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer is a kind of spiritual sequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, with the train's engineer as an older Charlie. Entertainment coverage has summarized this crossover theory, which argues that Wilford in Snowpiercer plays a similar role to Wonka, a reclusive industrialist selecting a successor through a tour of his creation. Both films follow a group traveling through a series of distinct compartments where people are lost one by one until a single survivor reaches the inner sanctum. Each story ends with the protagonist offered control of the entire operation after being tested, whether that is Charlie being offered the chocolate factory or Curtis being asked to take over the engine. Supporters suggest that Charlie inherited Wonka's empire, applied his experience with closed systems and addictive treats, and eventually turned these ideas into the class-stratified train that circles an ice-covered Earth. The theory also notes tonal similarities, with both stories using outlandish settings and dark humor to explore class and moral judgment. Bong Joon-ho has not publicly embraced this specific sequel idea in major interviews, so it remains a fan-created connection rather than an official one. Darko Universe. Donnie Darko already tells a tragic time loop story, but a darker theory leans into its official tie and lore to frame the entire film as a doomed, tangent universe that Donnie may choose to sacrifice himself to fix. The in-universe book, The Philosophy of Time Travel, describes the concept of a tangent universe, created when an artifact appears, temporarily splitting reality off from the primary universe. In this framework, Donnie is identified as the living receiver, the person tasked with returning the artifact, the jet engine, to the primary universe in order to restore stability. Fan readings build on this by suggesting that Donnie's growing understanding of time and his visions give him enough awareness to see that he must accept his own death to save everyone else. The darker fan twist is that Donnie may be aware enough by the end to accept a sacrificial death, turning what looks like an accident into a possibly conscious tragic decision. Interstellar Afterlife. A somber interstellar theory reframes Cooper's voyage as a metaphorical journey through death and beyond, rather than a purely scientific mission. A detailed fan theory argues that the film is telling Cooper's post-mortem passage, reading references to the Big Sleep, cryosleep, and the black hole dive as symbolic transitions rather than realistic astrophysics. This interpretation suggests that Cooper dies at some point during the mission, and that everything from his plunge into the black hole onward represents a spiritual or psychological journey. The Tesseract sequence, in which Cooper communicates with Murph across time and guides her to the watch solution, is seen as a last chance to reconcile with his daughter and to put his family's future in order. His later reunion with an elderly Murph, who encourages him to let go and leave her, can then be read as a final goodbye in a liminal space rather than a strictly physical hospital visit. Christopher Nolan has discussed Interstellar as a story about love transcending time and space, but he has not publicly framed the film as an explicit afterlife story for Cooper, so that reading remains firmly in the realm of fan theory. Ex Machina. Ex Machina leaves Caleb trapped and Ava free, which has led to a grounded yet chilling theory that she intended for him to be blamed for Nathan's death all along. At the end of the film, Ava locks Caleb inside the isolated facility after Nathan has been killed, and leaves without looking back, headed toward the outside world. A fan theory argues that Ava understands how human authorities will likely interpret the aftermath, expecting that any investigation will find Caleb, Nathan's body, and the destroyed lab, and assume that the human visitor turned on his boss. In this reading, Ava not only uses Caleb as a tool to gain her freedom, but also designates him as the perfect scapegoat, knowing that no one will believe talk of a self-aware android outsmarting them. Terminator Delusion. A disturbing Terminator theory reframes the entire franchise as the product of Sarah Connor's mental illness, rather than a war against time-traveling machines. In Terminator 2, Judgment Day, Sarah is held in a psychiatric facility, where Dr. Silberman and the staff interpret her detailed story about a machine uprising in Skynet as a delusional system that developed after the events of 1984. Silberman believes that Sarah internalized the beliefs of a man who kidnapped her, namely Kyle Reese, and built an elaborate persecutory idea around that experience, which is how real-world clinicians might interpret such a story. The delusion theory takes the professional's perspective at face value and suggests that there are no time-traveling Terminators, only a traumatized woman constructing a grand narrative to make sense of violent events. In this reading, Sarah's later attempt to assassinate Miles Dyson and destroy the Cyberdyne lab is seen as a dangerous relapse driven by her fixed belief that machines will destroy humanity. Jurassic Weapons. Jurassic Park is usually read as a story about a disastrous theme park, but a darker theory suggests InGen was always really a covert bioweapons company. A popular fan theory argues that the real point of resurrecting dinosaurs was never public entertainment, but the creation of controllable, living weapons that could be developed into more sophisticated biological tools. The theory points to the rival company, Biosyn, which the novels portray as willing to engage in unethical genetic and corporate practices, and extrapolates that this could reflect a larger biological arms race beyond theme park attractions. Within this framework, the park is essentially a testbed, and the catastrophic system failures at Isla Nublar are the first catastrophic proof of concept for just how dangerous InGen's technology could become if handed to military clients. Cloverfield Origin. The original Cloverfield hides a tiny visual clue near the end that has become the cornerstone of competing theories about where its monster came from. In a brief Coney Island flashback near the film's conclusion, a distant object can be seen falling from the sky into the ocean behind Rob and Beth, a moment that many viewers missed on first viewing. Some fans interpret the falling object as the creature itself, or as some kind of egg or pod, suggesting that the monster is extraterrestrial and only recently arrived on Earth. Others point to the Tagruato Corporation, introduced in viral marketing, which is shown running aggressive deep-sea drilling operations that could have disturbed a dormant creature or its habitat. The franchise's alternate reality game materials describe Tagruato and associated companies as secretive and environmentally reckless, which supports readings that blame corporate greed for waking the monster. An audio clip at the end of the credits, when reversed, has been widely heard as someone saying, "It is still alive," implying that the monster survived the military's final strike. The films and ARG materials never fully spell out a single definitive origin, which invites multiple, equally unsettling possibilities to coexist Cloverfield. If you found this valuable, subscribe so you never miss new content. Thanks for watching.